Tell me what the hell are you scared of when in the end the only thing
Where's the love? Right here on this podcast. Welcome to Love Drops, where your hosts and One Love ambassadors, Charles and Diane, will share love, hope, and inspirational topics taken from their journey and world events. We will also include on-location recordings and special pop-up guests from cool places all around the world. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
whether big or small, love never fails. Oh, love it conquers all. Love never fails.
Welcome to the Love Drops podcast. Our guest today is no stranger to Diane and I. We had the pleasure of her joining us on a prior show. I won't get into all the details of that, but I will turn the thing over to Diane. Diane, will you introduce our guests to our listeners?
Well, thank you, Charles. I sure will. So, Valerie Probtsfeld is not only a guest, she is also a friend. And I love that. I love when we bring guests to the show and then after just make a true human connection that goes on and on and on. Valerie and I have done life together since the last recording. And I tell you what, I received her book. I read it and it was just phenomenal. Also, I passed it on to another mom because I just feel like it's a book that needs to just keep going and going and going. I feel like every mom needs to have this book in her hands, to read it, to share it, and just to embrace all the wonderful nuggets that is within it. So, one of the sections was mental back roads and highways. And I was like, whoa, need to get on the show and talk about that. So, for new listeners just meeting Valerie, let me tell you a little bit about her. According to Valerie, I am a mom navigating life one day at a time. I love supporting others on their beautiful adventures we call motherhood. I'm a nurse practitioner with a master's from Yale, as well as an imperfect mom who loves. I love that. Valerie is also an exceptional flutist. And you know what? I'm going to turn it over to Valerie and allow her to just speak more and dive into mental back roads and highways. Valerie, you have the mic.
Oh, thank you so much, Diane and Charles. It's an absolute pleasure. I just love you both and I love the work you're doing. And I am thrilled to be back here on the show. I just love all of what we have talked about, Diane. And today I wanted to focus on mental backroads and highways because that was such an important part of my journey, even before writing the book, on how do I kind of visualize things in that way. So, going back to when I studied neurology, I was fascinated by the brain. I love neuroscience. I think it's so cool. And I also love art, and like my dad was an artist, and like I always was so fascinated by it. So I would draw diagrams of the body when I was younger, and even when I was studying in nursing school, NP school, sometimes it would help me to draw out whatever it was I was studying. So with the brain, well, there's so many things you can, study in particular about it. But if you really go down to the molecular level of the neurons, which neurons are, essentially brain cells, right? Like we have brain cells and there's one brain cell and another brain cell, and they talk to each other in what we call the synaptic cleft. And so I would draw these things that almost looks like trees, two trees together. And you would have like the two tree branches talking, but they also would like branch off into other lines or other like little areas, which I thought was interesting to visualize. So, that's where I really always loved that visual. But also, I would notice that sometimes I would do behaviors or habits that I didn't know why I was doing. I would have obsessive compulsive type things where a lot of times it allowed me to be successful. I would keep studying and studying and being like, oh, I got to study some more. I got to do this. I need to, or maybe study in this color or do this color. But when I got stressed out, sometimes it would hinder me as opposed to help me. So I was, studying more about, OCD and sometimes I was like, why do I think the way I do? And once I understood that it wasn't actually me, it was my brain and pathways. It was these neurons that I would draw that were kind of forming in a different pathway. I was like, that's really interesting that they're forming in a different way, but can I have them form in some other way? Can I build a different way? Can I ignore what I'm thinking about? If I'm, maybe check something, if I'm going to leave for a trip, sometimes that would, where I'm like, oh, I have to check a couple times, are the doors locked or whatever that is. I'm going to step away and ignore that and just kind of let that be and build a different pathway. And it's uncomfortable at that moment, but I'm going to try to do that. So anyway, I would work on that. And that's kind of the basis before I became a mom, that I did a lot of that. But once I became a mom, and we've talked about, Diane, generational legacies and how I wanted to be this different mom. I wanted to be an A+ mom, a perfect mom. But once my baby was born, she was taken to the NICU within 10 minutes. And I did not know what to do with that. I did not study for that. The control that I thought I had was taken away. It was this illusion. And so, everyone was calling me mom. And we had talked about that before, Diane, of everyone said, mom, 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 instead of my name, which I was, wow, this is a different name. I have a new name of mother, but that doesn't take away from my name as Valerie. But what is this name mother? What is it? And so I looked it up in the dictionary, and to mother is actually a verb according to Merriam-Webster, which means to give birth, allow one to rise, care for, or protect. And if you think about what gives birth, what allows one to rise, care for, or protect, and that's love. And it's wow, I can control that. I can control love as a verb as opposed to mom as a title, mom as my expectations or society. So bringing that back to, I kind of was just a pearl that I was oh, let me try and work on that a little bit more. And I remember one day, and I think we had mentioned this before, but my daughter, who was in the NICU, she was then 2, she said, I hate your angry face, Mom. You yell too much. And I was like, no, I don't. I'm not as yelling as much as my mom was. But I had a video camera going on in the background because we had a nanny or something earlier, and I forgot to turn it off. And as a flutist, I'm like, maybe let me assess how I sound. Am I yelling, or am I yelling as much as my mom was? I don't think I was, but let me check. And when I listened back on it, I sounded exactly like my mom. Yes. It was wild. What was in my head was not what my daughter was seeing. It's I have to work on this. And that's when I kind of thought about those mental back roads and highways from back in the day, where I'm I have a highway right now to yelling. I have a highway to an angry face. And how can I take what I had learned, with working on other things in my mind? How can I put that to not yelling? How can I choose gratitude in the moment, or choose mindfulness in this moment? And that brought me to, researching. I was reading so many parenting books at that point in time. And I came across Carol Dweck and growth mindset, which wasn't necessarily parenting in itself, more education and all of that too. But I feel once I learned about we're not a failure, it's just not yet. We're always growing, we're always learning. It made me think more of those neurons and those back roads of I can just take different pathways, almost like exercising. The brain's not a muscle, but it certainly acts like one, where if we take a different route, if I choose gratitude in this moment instead of yelling, I can strengthen that. I was trying to think of visuals as I was writing my book, because I love nature and there's such power, I feel in nature. And when I started writing it, which took about 5 years or so, but I remember starting to write it, and it was a winter scene, much like today. Before we started recording, I was telling Diane and Charles that last week it was 75 degrees outside and sunny in Chicago, and now there's snow. And it's
Yes.
it's like wild. But anyway, I was taking a winter walk. So much like today, there was snow. I was walking with my kids to find a sledding hill. And I remember I was holding my youngest, who was kind of like a baby, 18 months or so. And the other two were running up ahead, and they were like, Mom, come and, join us on this sledding hill. You have to see it. It's magical. And I was like, oh, this is annoying. Like, there's sticks and branches as I'm walking through this winter forest, and I am having to push all the shrubs and all the thorns or burrs or whatever out of the way to make a different path. It's difficult. But once I got to that hill, I was like, oh, I'm glad I got there. I'm glad. It was almost magical in a sense. And I was able to be mindful in the moment, and the sun was shining, and it was just a beautiful scene of like just early motherhood. And I'm like, God, this
I
is
love that. Yes.
yeah.
You've unpacked so much. I want to kind of circle back a little. So, you start with just the title mom. And so how you used your experience to incorporate love in it. So that love was one of the mental back roads that you took when you had to adjust to that new title, mom versus Valerie. So it's easier to navigate that back road when driving on love. So that was ingenious, right? And that made it personable for you, right? Then we fast forward to where with your daughter, and she says, Hey, I don't like your angry face. And that again speaks to how we as moms, we always feel like we're going to get it better. My firstborn, my daughter, she went to NICU too, and that was not a part of the plan. That was not a part of the plan of motherhood for me. We were going to coddle and, I'm going to breastfeed and we're going to bond. Well, all of that was taken away. So then it's like, wait, hold up. So, there is like a little anger in there. So you have to find a way to just rewire that. So, you found your way of like, okay, let me just rewire. Things are not as planned. And then with the angry face, you took a look at the camera and you're like, oh, wow, she's right. Yeah, I thought I wasn't going to be my mom. Yeah, I am. Yeah, we got to make some adjustments here. And so that mental back road allows us to make decisions that are different so that we can get the results that we want. And, those intentional pauses are great to interject in that scenario. And then, going out with your kids in the snow. Mom, come on, come on, come on. It's just like, come on, I'm doing my best, I'm trying. But you kind of recalculate the route on your mental highway, right? And then you get up there and you're like, wow, I'm so glad they pulled me into this. This is magical. I'm in a magical wonderland. It's so worth it. And so we speak on those mental back roads in motherhood. And this time I wanted to also incorporate just into relationships. So I love the way that you draw things out. I think that's awesome because it gives a visual. I'm a visual, audio, and tactile learner. So all of it, and the visuals definitely help. I love art as well. So in the form of relationship, I want to just kind of touch that here as well, just those mental back roads as you relate as a family, as you relate to your husband, because you're mom and he's dad. And, sometimes they don't understand us. It's like sometimes they don't get it because we make it seem so easy. We do. Before I have you jump in, I think Charles is just biting at the bit over here. So, Charles.
Yes, I liken that you went through a self-analysis before running off and grabbing other resources. You tapped into your personal golden nuggets that were all in there and started evaluating those and helping you map out your highways and back roads. But you started with self. And you say, wow, look at all of these things. Look at the faces I was making that I didn't see them because they were my faces making them, and things of that nature. You started with that self-analysis and look what it got, a book as well.
Yes, yes. So let's pivot into relationships. So those mental back roads, how would you say they've helped just in the relationship with you and your husband, you and your mom, just in the adult relationships of mothering?
I think that's a great question and something that I think I'm still kind of navigating and learning, right? I mean, I think going back just briefly to that winter scene, it's interesting that it was so hard the first time to kind of trailblaze that path. But the more I take it, the more I walk on it, the easier it can become. And I think that's so much of whatever is hard or whatever is difficult, we have to remember that if we keep practicing that, it does become easier over time. Everything that's simple now was once hard. Even like if we think about babies, like learning to walk, like they didn't just start, like they had to fall, they had to do those things. And I certainly feel like that is the case with relationships in general. I have a chapter on, connections essentially as one of the mental back roads. And I think that one is so incredibly powerful because there is an interesting study, the Harvard study of adult development. It started, I believe, in 1938, so almost 100 years. It is an ongoing study. It's one of the longest run ongoing studies that has incorporated different socioeconomic classes, different generations of what is the key to happiness? What is happiness? And what that study continually reveals, despite all other variables, is friendships, is positive relationships, is connection, either with spouse, with family, with friends. And I think that is so powerful. It's almost like when we say like the pursuit of happiness, we should actually say the pursuit of friendships, the pursuit of connection, because that's where happiness is, right? So like for me, I didn't really have an example of how to connect in a way that didn't have angry faces, I think. And I don't think it was an intentional, like Charles was saying, like it's your own face, like doing the reaction. So unless you have a video camera, like assessing yourself or whatever, you don't know that. And so I was struggling to find that as a child. But the one person that did provide smiles to me was my grandma. And I called her Rain Grandma because she had one of those like 1970s oil lamps that rained, like it looked like rain. And so she was Rain Grandma. But anyway, she would smile at me, and that's all she did. She did a lot of other things, but that's like, to me, that's all she needed to do was to smile. It made me feel safe. It made me feel like worthy. And so I think that is the basis of any relationship that I try to remind myself. I try to take that mental road of, if I'm feeling angry right now or if I like am frustrated, if I want to say something to like my husband or to, my mom or whoever that is. So not just with kids, but with like, if there's something that I try to assess, like, am I smiling right now? Am I saying, like, how's my body language? And I try to like envision Rain Grandma in a sense, because it's just simple yet profound thing to do.
Yes.
You need to feel safe. Like that's the basis. So to feel safe first, like we humans, like babies, that's the first thing they see is a smile. Even like when I'm doing a reel, like when you post reels and stuff on, I think it's on Instagram in particular, there's like those little like clips where you can see if your face is making a weird face or a smile. And you're like, oh, I want my face to like have, when it's on my thing, to have a smile, not some weird like look I'm doing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, like I'm subconsciously smiling as I'm like looking for a smile. It's just so basic to all of us. And I think we forget, like we're like, well, what can we say? What can we do? Well, first it's like, how are we showing up right now? Are we tense? Is our body language tense? Or are we relaxed? Are we, and that takes work. That takes practice.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you know what, Valerie? I know you do lots of research, so I'm sure you've probably heard this before, but a smile, your body responds to that smile. So sometimes, even if you are angry, frustrated, afraid, if you genuinely just stop and just smile, it restructures things within, and your body begin to follow that smile. And often the smile can go into a laugh, and we know the endorphins and things that are released with laugh, just all those happy vibes that just come out through it. And so I think that that's a great mental back road and highway, and that is to take the smile, right? You take a smile that, it's like, oh my God, I want to scream. And you just stop and you smile. And when you stop and you smile, you can't help but just feel that, you feel that smile within. And I'm like you too. If I go on camera, I'm like smiling. I make myself smile because I'd rather have a smile there than to be looking all crazy like, like, so it's just like, you do a smile. A smile often evolves into a giggle that evolves into a laugh, and a laugh is just a game changer. A laugh is a game changer. Like even if I fall, kind of like it may be embarrassing or whatever, and you just start laughing and it relaxes the whole atmosphere because if you're laughing, there's no blood in your eyeballs, still in your head and everything. Then people are like, "Oh, she's okay," and it breaks the ice. A smile, a laugh, it's an icebreaker.
Yeah, it is fantastic what a smile can do. It takes an entire holistic approach all over your body. Your mind, your body, your spirit is all stimulated from just a simple smile. And it's very healthy for you. It doesn't hurt at all.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I think that's great. And I do remember Grandma Rain in book. I love that. I am a grandmother. So I felt that connection from within with my grandmother, and then I felt it forward with me and my grandchildren because I feel like my grandma was Grandma Rain as well. They smiled, they made me feel safe. It was a safe zone. And I offer that to my grandchildren as well. So I felt connected to Grandma Rain as well. I thought that was beautiful. So as we are wrapping up, I can't believe we like got to this point already. I would like to know what you'd like to leave in form of a love drop on mental back roads with our listeners.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Charles and Diane. It's been an absolute pleasure. And I think there's so many things that we can choose to focus on if we just use a different perspective, right? Like, and painting is like with art. There's like, if you think about, perspective, you can have a house, for example, in the foreground or have the house in the background, and you can make it larger, you can make it smaller. What are you focusing on, like in your painting of the day? Like, are you focusing on like whatever the frustration is, or can you focus on like what are you grateful for today? What's, for example, like with it being snow, like I said earlier, for us in the Chicagoland area, it's late winter and it's like, why is there still snow? Why is it still cold? But I can change that perspective and I can say, there's beauty in the stillness. I can take a winter walk right now. I can focus on like the beauty of the snowflakes. Like they're pretty large because it's not too terribly cold. So you have like more larger snow. So there's beauty in those things. So I think really taking a step back and what am I focusing on? What's my perspective? What's in my foreground right now? And what's in my background? And should it be reversed? So that's what I'd like to leave with your listeners today.
I love that. Yes, I love that. Gratitude is definitely an attitude that creates latitude. All those rhymes there, right? That is definitely a mental back road that I take often, and that is gratitude wrapped also with accountability. Because sometimes, we find ourselves in places and we have to take accountability of our part. Sometimes maybe our angry face is what is setting the tone. And then maybe our smile is what will pivot the tone. So, Valerie, I thank you so very much for joining us again. And we look forward to having you back again because there's just so much more to the conversation to be had. And yeah, maybe next time you come, we can talk about your art, the creative mom that is you, in your art and in your music. I would love that. And as we always say, you know what? Your time is non-refundable. So thank you so much for your time today. Thank you so much for just your shine in my life. My life has definitely become much brighter with you in it, Valerie. So thank you for that. Thank you.
Thank you
you
so much.
Yeah.
Sharing your gratitude with such a positive attitude, supporting it all. It's fantastic.
Yes.
Y'all are amazing.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
And so for our listeners, we're going to put in the narrative Valerie's website where you can reach and learn more about her, more about those mental back roads and highways. Purchase her book, buy one, gift one, always a great idea. And also, we'll put the previous podcast from in our show notes too, so you can go back and listen to Valerie and I. And we appreciate you for hanging with us today. If this resonates, please share the podcast with others and subscribe if that resonates. And until next time, Charles and I leave you with one love.
Never a second will I waste, never an opportunity to taste the sweetness of this life.
Thank you for tuning in to the Love Drops podcast. Be sure to follow this podcast and share the love with everyone you know. Until next time, this is Charles and Diane signing off. One love.